Welcome in, everybody, to a Wednesday edition of Birds 365 here on JAKIB Sports. Getting ready for the NFL draft. Just 8 days away. Next Thursday night, everybody, is round one. And yesterday, Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni spoke. We'll get Johnny Mac's take on that. I'm your host, Zander Krause. That's my co-host, Johnny Mac, John McMullen, the number one Eagles beat reporter in town. Johnny Mac, how you doing on this Wednesday morning, brother?
Doing well. Trying to get there. I wish it would stop being windy, but I digress. It has been incredibly windy in our area for those who live outside the area, and it's got to stop. It's killing me.
Taking trees out, taking all sorts of stuff out for Johnny Mac. Let's hope the wind dies down. But Johnny Mac, your first trip down to the NovaCare complex in a little while yesterday for Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni to speak. I like how people every once in a while tossed a courtesy question to Nick, who then rambled on. But your thoughts, Johnny?
That's my concern. I've done that because the coaches, but Nick's going to ramble, man. So he
takes time, man. Even when it's not his presser, he takes up the time. So, but John, your initial reaction, man. I didn't want to cloud it with any sort of take that I have. I have a couple takes on what Howie had to say, but just your thoughts on what Howie said. Did anything stick out to you? Did any theme develop? Or did he drop any truth bomb that you want to share with the people?
No, he's very, you can tell he's all draft hyper focused. Yeah. He doesn't want to give anything away. Thematic things, which is always the reason I try to, they always not the reason, but the way I try to go. Cause you're not, people are like, ask about in player. You're not talking about players. Yeah, right. I mean, you don't want to give up. I like this guy. I don't like this guy. We're not going to take this guy. You're not getting that type of information. So, one of the things I've said for years from talking to NFL people that, and I was talking to you before, there's never 32 first round grades ever in good years. You're hoping to get to 20, maybe 21, 22. In a good year, and this is a bad year, and I've heard as low as 8 from people around the league, and to some of the more liberal people, maybe 14, 15.
That's what I was thinking. Just my ballpark in my head was, if it's not 32, is it 15 to 20? But maybe not this year.
Yeah, you got a tough time getting to 15, and a lot of it has to do with quarterbacks, and that's where. And he said. Because I said it on the show, I wanted to ask him, there's no first round trades, from the point of last year's draft to this year's draft. First time it's ever happened in the NFL since the merger, long time.
That's a significant period of time.
That is a long time. So I asked basically, Howie, what's going on? Why is that happening? And he downplayed it, but he did give it a little window into it. And he basically started talking about the quarterbacks. You go back to last year, everybody's moving up to get a quarterback. When you do those pre-draft, he did it with Carson Wentz. You remember he had the 2 trades.
Yep.
Because he was trying to get up to get Carson Wentz or Jared Goff. You're always trying to get a quarterback. So he backhand validated this quarterback class stinks. That's what it validates. It stinks. And nobody wants to move up to get a quarterback. And, the other part was Dallas Goedert, I guess, most notable player. And he said it's not going to affect the draft. I don't see how it can affect the draft if you don't have a tight end. But that's part of draft proofing the roster with our guy Harrison Bryant, Kylan Granson.
Right.
And at least you have competency with Grant Calcaterra added in. But boy, that's a significant down. I just don't agree with that philosophy that's draft proof properly,
right?
From a player personnel standpoint. But I think Dallas.
I don't know how many tight ends were out there to draft proof better than that. To be honest with you, you know what I mean? Like, was there an option or a move that they could?
No, it's not about not for their philosophy. I mean, they were only signing 1-year guys. I have no problem with the guys they signed. That's not the issue. I have a problem with the idea that what they're doing with Dallas Goedert. I think it's a mistake. But maybe, I don't know the other side. I don't know Dallas, and Dallas might be taking a Son Reddick type approach where it's like, no, I need my money. And if he's going to be that hardcore because they have other issues, as we've talked about with younger players coming up, and you got to make difficult decisions. And that might be the case. But just from a pure football personnel perspective, I don't like it. I don't like that downgrade. I could live with Mekhi Becton to Tyler Steen. I could live with even Milton Williams to Moro Ajomo and a draft pick, or I can live with a draft pick in Aziz Ojolari and Josh Uche. I can't live with nothing, no draft pick, and just Grant Calcaterra and Kylan Granson and Harrison Bryant. I can live with it literally.
No, I know what you're saying though, but it's you're not going to view it as a viable game plan to go into the season for success. I understand.
Yeah, so that's kind of where I am with that. But
yeah, did he mention the fact that they haven't brought any tight ends in? I mean, I had to turn it off because I had the National Football Show come on, so I didn't hear all of it.
No, he
I don't know if
talked about
commented on that, but
he talked about more the thematic part of top 30 visits and, you know, what they do and information gathering and the process. And, you know, that lately I've started paying more, you know, 5 years ago, I didn't pay much attention to top 30 visits, to be perfectly honest. And then they started drafting guys they were bringing in.
Yeah.
So, and how he mentioned there's been a change in how they look at it. He didn't, you know, define what that change was, but it's pretty clear to me what it was. They take them more seriously, and they're not as worried about the subterfuge and that kind of stuff. So he talked about it from that standpoint. So now, I mean, they've drafted a bunch of guys that they brought in on top 30 visits. And
yeah, I think, John, can you correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I heard that each of the last 3 years, the top 3 draft picks in the draft were all in on top 30 visits.
I'd have to look at them.
Yeah, I'd have to double check it. But somebody said that, and I'm like, wow, that's really significant. That is 9 of their top picks.
Well, Carter was in, Smith was in, Davis was in, so a bunch of guys were in.
I don't know if Quinyon and Coop were in last year, but I want to mention
Quinyon was in. I think Quinyon was in. I'm not sure.
I thought Cooper was in too. I thought for sure Cooper came in for the top 30.
I have to double check.
Either way, they're drafting a lot of top.
Yeah, they're drafting a lot of guys. And there are some teams that don't even. I don't know if people know this, but there are some teams that don't even do top 30 visits. Los Angeles Rams are always the outlier. The Rams do nothing. They basically, which is you know, and they're a very good drafting team.
Very good drafting team. You could argue they had the best draft class last year, even over the Eagles.
Well, they had the defensive rookie of the year. The Eagles had second. They had third. The Eagles had fourth.
Right. But they also had Cam Kitchens. They had some other good draft picks too in that class. Yep.
And so did the Eagles with Jalen, et cetera. But and there's still some optimism, you know, with certain people about certain players in on day 3. But so they both had good drafts, but you know, the Eagles do it more traditionally. The Rams don't even go to the combine. They don't go to combine. Don't do top 30 visits, which and you know, other teams eventually, if they continue to have this type of success, and maybe they won't, you know, other teams are going, well, why are we doing this? Why are we wasting money? You know how owners are. And they'll go back to scale back if the Rams continue to have success. Jacksonville, which is, you know, they're not a good organization. They don't do top 30 visits. Those are the 2 I know of that don't do them. So, you know, it's not there's a difference between how teams handle them, and the Eagles have had tremendous success, and it correlates with their run of drafts that have been very successful, correlates with them taking more of their top 30 visits.
Right.
Drafting players. And again, we talk about then Kenyon Green was in. They trade for him a couple years later. Was talking about that, and Dorian Thompson Robinson was in. They trade for him a couple years later. So, They have this, what Howie described, they might have 500 reports and you only bring in 25 guys. If you look at the draft picks and the undrafted free agents and you say that looks like a wait, but you have all that data, and when somebody becomes available, you already have the work and you can go back to it. So that's how the Eagles kind of do the process, and it's been very successful for them. But it's the Rams prove you can do it other ways as well.
Yeah. If I'm the Eagles, I'm not changing a thing, though. They've been drafting very successfully, very well the last couple of years, last 3-4 years. So I'm not changing a thing just because the Rams don't do it. But I understand what you're saying, John. Back to the no 32, first round grades. Never 32 grades, as Howie pointed out, which is good stuff
years.
From him.
Never.
But
I've been saying for years, and I got so many people who push back on that.
Well, Howie just confirmed it.
Yeah. Which I love when Howie
emphatically never. Yeah. He didn't just say this year is not 32. Yeah, he said there's never 32 first round.
Never. Grades. Trust me, there's never.
Yeah. So with that being said, though, and the Eagles sitting at 32, I thought his answer to that was interesting, and I'll read you a little bit of the quote of what piqued my interest. Let me pull it up here. Sorry, I thought I had it right here. He said that, we just said there are never 32 first-round grades on your board. We don't have 32 first-round grades in this draft. Now, when I read that or when I heard him say it, I'm thinking maybe Howie is thinking about moving up here. Obviously, they asked him about the extra picks. You'd have to move up pretty far, but if they have a top 15 guy or top 20 guy and they start to fall into the 20s, that's where I could see Howie pouncing, packaging a couple of his picks and moving up. Has your barometer on whether you think they'll trade up changed at all after listening to Howie yesterday?
No. He also said later, it's very difficult to get in the top 10 or top 20 when you're drafting, when you're starting.
I don't think they're going top 20. I think it would be like 23 to 26, somewhere in there.
Targeted trade up, yes, possibility, but more likely in the five range, five up, I would say, would be the purview. And that's a possibility because they have so many picks over the next couple of years, or projected to have so many picks over the next couple of years. But no, not a splash here move up. It's just, you got to give up too much. And this is not the draft to do it. It's just not. I mean, again, I don't know what the Eagles are, but my guess at the most liberal, I said 14, 15. It's a lot of teams that have to go in different directions. Like last year is a perfect example. Quinyon had a first round grade from the Eagles and they got him at 22. I guarantee they didn't have 22 first round grades. Big quarterback draft. Certain guys who probably didn't get first round grades from the Eagles for a couple reasons. One, they didn't need a quarterback. And second, there's some back and forth on Bo Nix and Penix and particularly. And it was also the strange draft when Latu was the first defensive player taken. Nobody was taking defensive players. Right. So Quinyon fell back. So let's say, for argument's sake, they had 15 first round grades last year and they got a first rounder at 22. That means 7 teams,
right, didn't take a first round grade.
Yeah. Now, the odds of that happening this year are minuscule because you're losing 10 spots from 22 to 32. You have a worse draft from the perspective of talent. And to have that many teams, you're going to see a bunch of teams reach for quarterbacks who shouldn't have first round grades, because I think 4 are going to go. But yeah, it's not going to get that back to the Eagles.
Now, Howie spoke yesterday about interior D-line, how much he loves it. We all know how much he loves it. We don't need to be told that, but he did reemphasize it's the fastest way to get to the quarterback. We value that position. And he did just let a damn good interior defensive lineman walk my estimation was if one of those defensive tackles that they like, I don't know who it is. Maybe it's Walter Nolan. Maybe it's, I don't know, one of the other dudes that could slip a little bit down the board into the 20s. I could see them pouncing on that just because I think they talked about how we have a talented, star-heavy roster in win now mode. I mean, I could see them going up to do that. I've always said that, but star-heavy, win now, go get your guy at interior defensive line. I know it's going to take a lot, but I think it makes sense. I'm not saying they're going to do it. I just think it makes sense, and I wouldn't rule it out.
Well, the only thing I'll say about that is obviously the Eagles value that position. We always talk about it, and I've said they're going to take it. Most likely, they're going to take a defensive front player because that's the deepest part of the draft. But if you remember, he was asked a question specifically about interior. If you asked him a question about edge rush, he would have said the same thing. We value it, blah, blah, blah. Talked about the traits of an edge rusher, why instead of defensive tackle. If he would have asked a question about offensive line, he would have said the same thing. We value it. So I wouldn't, he was asked a specific question about defensive tackle. And he answered, and all you can take from that, in my estimation, is they value the position, which we already knew, but they value defensive end just as much, edge rusher. They value offensive line just as much. And if he was asked that specific question, he would have answered in a very similar way.
Yeah, we'll see what they end up doing in the draft. But interesting comments from Howie. Nothing crazy. He didn't continue his run of dropping a little tidbit for us that really yesterday. More veiled conversation there, more veiled comments. We got Mike Gill in the green room. We'll have a great show planned for everybody today. We appreciate all you guys being here. Brandon, Philly Don, what's up, Philly Don? Crowley, Twiz, Timpo, what's up, Timpo? Mesmerized. We appreciate everybody for being here. Hit that like button this morning. All right, we got to smash that like button. Got to try and get to 100 or 150 likes today. We got Mike Gill early, and we have Brandon Lee Gouton late. So we'll have two great guests today to share their opinions and add to the conversation as well. So appreciate everybody being here. Let's get the Mike Gill from 97.3 ESPN down the shore.